Hi guys, and welcome back to Slice of Mike. So today I'm just doing my March wrap-up because I read a lot of books this month that I have a lot of things to say about, so I will save my April TBR for Friday. I read 7 books in the month of March. Most of them I gave 4 out of 5 stars, 1 I gave 3 out of 5, and 1 I gave 5 out of 5. The first book that I read in March is Sarafina by Rachel Hartman. This was an incredibly complex and very moving YA fantasy. It reminded me a lot of Aragon with a little bit more political intrigue thrown in, and it also felt like Game of Thrones to me, even though I said I would stop comparing books to Game of Thrones because I do it all the time. This book is about a young, half-human, half-dragon girl. She's also a very talented musician, and she lives in a country called Gorod, which has a troubled history with dragons that live nearby. Currently, there's a truce between the two species, but that peace is looking like it's going to fail. Somebody's trying to start a war, and Sarafina is uniquely gifted, and she may be able to track down the culprit. So I said this book is complex because there's so much effort that goes into the world building here. I love all the different cultures and languages, and even the dragon culture is very well formed. It also puts dragons, which are very common in fantasy, obviously, in a new light and introduces new elements and new characteristics to that species. So I really liked it, but I didn't love it enough to give it 5 stars out of 5. I feel like the story might pick up some more in the next book, which is called Shadow Scale, and I'll probably read that very soon. The next book I read is The Princess Bride by William Goldman. This I read for book club, and I have seen the movie plenty of times, maybe too many times. I don't love the story necessarily as much as other people, and it's probably because I never watched the movie as a kid, so there's no nostalgic elements there for me. A lot of people told me that I wouldn't like this book because they didn't like it, and that might have colored my reaction after reading this, but I do have to say that I didn't like the book very much because it was very similar to the movie, and a lot of the lines from the book were placed directly into the movie. I think the parts that I did like in the book were things that didn't happen in the movie, like the backstories of Fezzik and Inigo, and there's an introduction by the author which I found very funny and relatable. So I'm glad I read this because it was a classic, and like I said, it was funny, but it didn't really speak to me on a fundamental level, and I probably wouldn't pick it up or buy it for my own bookshelf. The next book I read is The Boy Who Lost Fairyland by Catherine M. Valenti. This, of course, is my favorite series of all time, and I can't say enough good things about it. So the first 3 books in this series feature a main character named September. She is a young, precocious, sassy girl, and she's quickly become one of my favorite literary characters of all time. However, this book is a departure from that and features a boy named Hawthorne, who is a troll from Fairyland. He's abducted and made into a human I think he lives in Chicago, but he never fully forgets who he was in Fairyland, and he meets another character from where he lived before, and together the two of them conspire to go back to Fairyland. So I know I've said before how much I love this author's writing. I think everything she talks about is so spot on and so enjoyable and just really beautiful prose. This is also definitely a book that I would say is a book for book lovers because it talks a lot about the transportive magic of reading and just the power of the imagination. So the reason I gave this book 4 stars out of 5 instead of 5 stars is because I didn't really enjoy the fact that September was hardly in the book at all. Plus, rather than introduce new settings, a lot of the places that we see in this book are recycled from the first 3 books. I think the coolest part of this book is that it set up the 5th book, which is going to be the last in the series, really well, and I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want to spoil you. I definitely recommend the series as a whole, although you might be just a bit disappointed when you get to this one. The next book I read is Cress by Marissa Meyer. This is the 3rd book in her Lunar Chronicles series. I've read the first 2 as well as the prequel Fairest, and this book fully introduces the character named Cress, who is inspired by the classic fairy tale of Rapunzel. There's a ton of action that takes place in this book, and I think other people have mentioned that it's really well paced and it keeps you absorbed, even though it's like 500 pages. So overall, I thought it was a quick and entertaining book. However, I can see myself developing just a small problem with the series, and I don't want people to think that I am trash-talking the Lunar Chronicles because I definitely love them. I gave Cinder 5 stars out of 5. It was my favorite book that I'd read in a long, long time. But I do have to say that I think as the author introduces more characters and the plot gets more complex, it's harder for me to relate to characters like Cinder that initially drew me to the series. The reason I love Cinder is because she is one of the only relatable characters that I can think of from the book. She's the only character, as far as I can think, that has an actual problem and an actual, like, psychological block that prevents her from being open with other people. Obviously, she has to hide the fact that she's half cyborg, plus she's been mistreated by lots of people in her life, and when she finally does have the opportunity to find true love, she kind of rejects the offer because she doesn't feel like she's worthy of it or that she's ready for it or any of those things. The other characters, while really fun to read about, just seem so unrealistic to me. Like Wolf and Scarlet and Cress and Prince Thorn are all just beautiful people. Yes, they have a few surface flaws, like Cress is socially awkward because she's been in isolation for so long, and Wolf is angry about being the person that he is. But they're still relatively perfect, they're still super strong and super intelligent, and they can do pretty much everything from hack into a national security network to fly a plane across the world. So I think after reading this book, my perception of the series has dropped just a smidge, although I haven't given any of the books lower than 4-star ratings, and I really enjoy the series overall, and I'll definitely pick up the last book when it comes out in the winter, in the fall, sometime. The next book, however, is one that I didn't enjoy at all, and that is The Islanders by Christopher Priest. So The Islanders is about a vast chain of islands. I think there are thousands of different islands, all slightly different from each other. This book is written in the style of a travel guide, so each chapter is about a different island, and it's usually written with a brief introduction to the geography and the climate of the place, and then it starts talking about a character who lived there, or visited, or something important that happened on the island. I think going into this, I expected the book to be something that it was not. I was expecting magical elements and just super weird mystery stuff to happen. I know this book is trying to say something really important, but I just don't know what it is, and I think if I figured that out, I would feel a whole lot better about reading this. But for me, it was mostly inaccessible, and I didn't know what it was trying to say to me. The next book I read is Fuzzy Nation by John Scalzi. This is the first John Scalzi book that I've ever read, but I know a lot of other booktubers read it and really loved it, so I decided to pick it up. The main character in this book is named Jack Holloway, and his job is to mine foreign planets for elements and precious gems. So he's been on this planet called Zara 23 for a while, and he just discovered this huge vein of something called a sunstone, which is like the world's most precious element. So Jack is set up to profit a lot from this. However, one day he returns home from a dig and he finds this cat-like creature inside of his house. And after some investigation, it appears that the cat creature is incredibly smart and may even be sentient. The important part of this is that Jack's company cannot mine on a planet that has a sentient species of its own because technically that species owns all of the planet's resources. Jack quickly becomes attached to this species and he engages in a battle with his company to see if they are sentient or not. Overall, I like this book a lot. Jack's character is super funny and very intelligent. He used to be a lawyer before he was disbarred for something that happened in the past. This book was a blend between pure science fiction and also sort of a legal thriller, and while I really enjoyed it, I didn't feel like the world was fully fleshed out for me, and the plot was just a little too light for my tastes. There wasn't very much complexity as far as different elements of the book went. It was mostly about Jack and the species and the fate of the company that he worked for. But overall, it was a funny and engaging and very fast-paced piece of science fiction, so if any of the things that I've mentioned about this book appeal to you, I would highly recommend that you check it out. So the last book that I have to talk about is my favorite book from the month of March, and it is The Bees by Laline Paul. I picked this book up purely on the strength of professional reviews and some of the other booktubers who read it and really enjoyed it. This book is about a bee named Flora who lives in a hive in an orchard somewhere in the US. Flora was born as a worker bee, but certain things happen throughout the course of the book, and she adopts different tasks and jobs throughout the hive. Most importantly, she becomes a forager, so she's able to leave the hive and visit different nearby areas. This book is written from Flora's perspective, and what I really found unique about this book is that I was able to relate to a bee, which is weird to say. This book has a lot of things that it's trying to say, like the danger of governmental control and racial segregation and social hierarchy and all that kind of stuff. So in some sense, it's similar to a book like Animal Farm, which is obviously about communism, but it also has some very enjoyable fairy tale vibes. For example, Flora has encounters with different insects and animals, one of them being spiders, which in this book are described as kind of like mystical prophets, sort of. She also meets a colony of wasps who are portrayed as tricksters in this book and try to trick her and kill her. I didn't really know the details of this book when I started reading it, and I was very surprised by how much I enjoyed it, and I would definitely recommend this to everybody out there. So those are all the books that I read in the month of March. Like I said, I'll be back on Friday with my April TBR with some more fabulous books to talk about. If you guys have read any of the books that I mentioned in today's video, please let me know and give me your thoughts on those books. So that is it for today, and I'll see you all back here on Friday. Bye!